My name is Hugh Brogan. I'm Research Professor of History at the University of Essex. I'm the author of the Longman History of the United States, which is also available in a Penguin paperback. I can't drive a car, so I'm dependent on trains for much of my travelling. I'm very interested in the future of railways and hope it'll be an efficient and agreeable one. The economic problem of building and maintaining nationwide railway systems is this, that to set them up in the first place demands an immense capital investment, and traffic frequently, historically, has been very profitable, but every so often there comes a crisis of one kind or another. The biggest crisis, of course, is the invention of the motor car, and railways cease to be profitable. So states, nation-states, come to the rescue of private enterprise. But they also, which isn't so often recognised, they also have to come to the rescue when the railways are being built. If railways had relied in America on private capital in the mid-19th century, they would have been built very slowly and not nearly on the scale that was required. So the federal government made available immense blocks of land, very valuable land, and in effect gave them to the railroad companies. And that furnished the railroad companies with the resources necessary to build the huge transcontinental railroads. Railroads have suffered appallingly in the United States from the competition of airlines and the interstate continental highway motor traffic for both passengers and freight. But the United States has discovered that for some purposes they can't do without railways. For example, the area between Boston and Washington, D.C., the Boswash corridor, is dependent on commuter trains for efficient economic functioning. The same is true of the West Coast, the area around Los Angeles and San Francisco. At the very moment, they're trying to develop a high-speed train link, a very high-speed train link between San Francisco and LA. But once more, the old problem comes forward: where's the money to come from? There are limits to what the customers will pay. The capital costs of all this engineering are enormous, so sooner or later the taxpayer has to come into play. Americans officially believe that private enterprise can solve all problems, but it can't, as the case of the railways shows very clearly. They get round this ideological difficulty very practically. If you're going to raise the money for the railroad or the rapid transit system or whatever you call it, the state or the city or the federal government agrees to issue bonds, and they have to be approved in special vote either by Congress or, in the case of state and city government, by the voter. The matter is laid before the competent authority, either Congress or, in what's in effect a referendum, the voters. It's approved, you get your rapid transit system, and it's inconsistent, but nobody cares. The problem is solved, and you can go on believing in the omnicompetence of private enterprise. So the moral seems to be that big transportation projects always need support and investment, directly or indirectly, by the state, and the myth of private enterprise is no help at all. And the further moral is that if the United States can't build its transportation systems entirely by private enterprise, nobody can. So when we turn to HS2, we see that if it is to be built, it can only be paid for by the state, and the question therefore arises of how can the state do this as efficiently as possible, in other words, not let the costs balloon as such public undertakings usually do. So it seems to me that if we care about public expenditure. As citizens, it's our business to learn as much as we can about HS2 to decide if it is going to be worthwhile or whether it will be more than we can afford.